ever since we learned that Yuji is alive and immortal and in his prime and also the strongest of his era. The question comes, how strong is Itadori Yuji after 68 years of training with two of the greatest techniques in the world, reverse curse technique, a black flash master, and soul manipulation on top of so many more things? Just how strong is Yuji right now? And since Yuji will be appearing incredibly soon in JJK Modulo, as I've talked about in my previous video, I want to talk about just how strong is Yuji going to be and how strong is this immortal Modulo Prime Yuji. This is going to be a big one, and this is more so a video I just want to make because I'm passionate about it and I really love Yuji, as you can see by the length. So let's just get right into it. Be sure to leave a like on the video, it does help out if you do. Thank you very much. And of course, subscribe for a ton of consistent and quality JJK content just like this. If you love JJK Modulo, I promise you will not regret subscribing. I got a ton of JJK Modulo videos on the channel and I don't stop posting. So let's just start. I'm going to break this video down into so many different sections because it's a very big one. So the first thing to talk about is Itadori Yuji as a person, as a base. Who is he? Well, his grandfather is the reincarnation of Sukuna's twin. Mistakenly, because of the way it was worded in the manga, some people and even myself thought that it was Yuji's father, but in a volume extra on volume 29, Gege clarifies that it's actually the grandfather that is the reincarnation of Sukuna's twin. However, it seems like when you have children, a fragment of your soul is passed down, so because of that, Yuji does have a portion of Sukuna's soul, which makes him a perfect vessel, which of course makes sense, which is the whole reason why Kenjaku had a child with Yuji's father. On top of this, Yuji was actually sealed with a Sukuna finger inside of him. This is a fact that's confused quite a lot because of the incredibly, and I mean incredibly bad translation of the Viz, the official volumes. It's so bad that it's actually just wrong. Like a lot of the things that the Viz says for the original JJK is straight up not just a bad translation, but mistranslated or fully incorrect. I made a video on that 2 years ago that's aged like wine, but it was one of those things that was unfortunately lost by the horrible translations of John Werry, person who translates Viz Media. For JJK at the time, thank God he's not doing JJK Modulo. But yes, Yuji had a Sukuna finger sealed inside of him, which was making him the perfect vessel, which combines with him having a portion of Sukuna's soul, as we explained before. Now, it's debatable as to whether Sukuna kept that finger and took it with him when he left Yuji's body into Megumi's, or if Yuji actually kept that finger himself. It does seem like, with the way that it was worded by Sukuna himself and Kenjaku and even Yuji, that the final finger that was sealed inside of Yuji as a child when he was born was actually taken by Sukuna when he transferred into Megumi's body. Meaning, as of right now, Yuji has none of Sukuna's fingers inside of him. However, he is still technically a Sukuna cursed object, shrouded in Sukuna's cursed energy as well as his own mixed in. So Yuji should have a presence similar to Sukuna when we do see him. And this is probably the reason that Yuji was so strong physically even before he had any cursed energy at all. He was comparable to semi-grade 1 Maki at the very beginning of the series, and that is made evident when we see him fighting Higuruma, a high-tier grade 1 sorcerer with a domain with 0 cursed energy. In this fight, he not only tanks attacks from Higuruma, but he tanks it from Higuruma's cursed tool that comes from a domain. And Yuji is actually able to hold his own. Now, admittedly, he says in his own words that I'm not gonna last like this, like there's just no way I'll win, but he was able to defend and block attacks and even just survive, which makes sense since his base with no cursed energy is probably around semi-grade 1 physically, Higuruma being a high-tier grade 1. That does line up with what we were told in the beginning of the series about how strong he is, him being comparable to Maki even with no cursed energy. Like they're actually around the same level, if not the same. It's also important to know that Yuji is a martial arts master. He does quite a lot of martial arts techniques that we see in the manga and especially in the anime that adapts its own version, where he does martial art techniques without him even knowing it. This was actually said by Gege at some point when a fan asked, did Yuji train for these techniques? How is he doing these very famous martial arts moves? And Gege says that Yuji just does it on instinct, which is a point of saying Yuji is, in terms of martial arts, an actual prodigy in that aspect. If he's able to replicate and even do moves that masters do solely based off of instinct, it is a very incredible feat from Yuji that a lot of people underestimate. He also has a great battle IQ, as we've seen many times, as when he's fighting with Todo, how he tricks many characters such as Mahito as well. Generally, he is not portrayed as a incredibly intelligent character, as was seen when he doesn't get a lot of plans, but in actual combat, he seems to be very intelligent, which is a very common trope with shonen such as Natsu, Goku, Luffy, where they always are very dumb generally, and I say that in a general sense, but in terms of battle IQ, they're just off the charts, you know? It's one of those common shonen tropes that does go down to Yuji, so he's not free from that shonen trope. Now, of course, Yuji got quite a lot stronger over time, especially during his fight with Todo, where he learned how to use his cursed energy far better, and he only grew stronger over time. As was said after the Shibuya incident by Choso, he was more refined, physically stronger and faster, and became a demon god. And of course, this would have just generally improved improved over time after everything in the Shinjuku Showdown. And there was that 2-month training where he did body swap training, where he mastered even the art of simple domain, and learning domain techniques helped him master his domain expansion, which we will talk about later. But generally, this Shinjuku training gave him special grade level reinforcement and output, as well as speed. So just during Shinjuku, he was already at a high tier Heian era level special grade reinforcement and output, which is incredible to say. And it makes sense of how he's keeping up with Sukuna, although was nerfed admittedly, still incredible that he was keeping up the way he did, and it evidently was seen that he was getting stronger as Shinjuku was going down, as in the beginning he would just often get destroyed by Sukuna, but by the end he was really going hand to hand with him and even fighting pretty evenly with him. Sukuna was still stronger of course, but it makes sense because he hit so many black flashes, and of each of the black flashes he grew, in Sukuna's own words, that Yuji was actually catching up to his level, or at least trying, meaning he was getting stronger with each black flash he was hitting, which of what we know of black flashes actually does make sense. Even more so, him hitting black flashes in Shinjuku awakened his curse technique that was always sleeping within it, Shrine. And of course, during this 2-month training for the Shinjuku Showdown, he mastered reverse curse technique, he ate his brothers, which is the reason he is immortal, because he ate the death paintings, and that changed his physiology, as was said by Choso in chapter 258. After he ate the brothers, he gained a body just like the death paintings, which means he's able to convert cursed energy into blood, something that normal blood manipulation users cannot do, as I'll talk about in the blood manipulation part as well. But we've also seen it with his physiology, as when Sukuna cuts his leg off during his domain expansion, Yuji is able to reattach it in a way that normal blood manipulation users cannot do, because his body is no longer human. Yes, his body was human before, but after eating the death paintings, as was said by Choso and Yuji himself, that actually transformed his body, giving him the body of a death painting, and a byproduct of that transformation was getting the blood manipulation curse technique. That was actually simply a bonus, an unintentional side effect. And Yuji is aware of his soul. As was said by Sukuna as he was fighting Maki, when you actually have someone live inside of you and you become more aware of your soul, that actually lets you literally see your own soul. So for example, if Maki were to cut Yuji with the Soul Cutter Katana, a normal reverse curse technique user wouldn't be able to heal that. But Yuji would be able to heal a reverse curse technique because he is aware of his soul and he's able to see the outline of his soul. It's very interesting because that means he could also heal attacks from Mahito. So let's say Yuji is fighting Mahito and Mahito ideal transfigures and blows off Yuji's hand in that way. Yuji can heal that because he can actually heal the outline of his soul, which is an incredible feat because most sorcerers cannot do that. Yuji is only able to do that because he housed Sukuna. And a bonus of this, and this is the biggest reason they even beat Sukuna, without this they would have not beaten Sukuna. It just doesn't matter, they wouldn't have won without this, but he was able to attack directly between the borders of Megumi and Sukuna's soul, actually weakening the bond between them and weakening Sukuna's hold on Megumi, which reduced the output greatly of Sukuna with every attack he did. And of course, Yuji did learn reverse curse technique during the 2 months, and Yuji's reverse curse technique is better than any other characters in the entire series because he doesn't need to use a lot of cursed energy to do it. Even Sukuna and Gojo need to use a lot of cursed energy when they use reverse curse technique, but Yuji doesn't, simply due to the fact that it is just cheaper for him fundamentally, as when he ate his brothers, the death paintings, and his body became that of a death painting, he gained that ability just like Choso, and this is what Choso said directly again, I'll show the page on the screen, but Yuji's ability to turn cursed energy into blood means he doesn't need to carry blood bags like a Kamo member, but also when he uses reverse curse technique, it is incredibly cheap to do. So often Yuta, as we saw during Sendai Colony in the beginning, his cursed energy ran out incredibly quickly, even though he's got the second most in the series, second to Sukuna, and that was because he kept having to spam reverse curse technique. Yuji in that situation wouldn't be like Yuta, he would barely lose any cursed energy. The only character who is actually better than him in this way is Gojo. Because Gojo has the 6 eyes, he never runs out of cursed energy, so in his case, it literally doesn't matter. Gojo is a cheat code in this case. Now, let's talk about the juicy part. How strong was Yuji after the 68 years of training in his prime as a monster? Now, we know as a fact that he is bare minimum a lot stronger than Mahoraga, like a decent amount stronger, so much so that the two aren't even comparable at all. And the reason we know this is because A, Nobara is far stronger than Mahoraga as he's killed him relentlessly, and multiple characters at multiple different points directly, this isn't just me speculating or interpreting the words in a certain way, they have directly said that Yuji is comparable to Nobara, and even that they need their own deterrent, and Yuji is that deterrent. He is an equal character to Nobara in that sense, with us knowing as a fact that Nobara is on Ryomen Sukuna's level, as was portrayed several times, as was said directly even in the second chapter saying it's a Ryomen Sukuna level threat. As a scene when he fights Mahoraga, he is putting up the same performance that Sukuna did in Shibuya, if not better, minusing the domain expansion since we don't know what Nobara is going to do next, and even characters directly directly comparing him to Sukuna in the way that Uro called Sukuna Calamity, and in the exact same way, they are calling Dabura a literal calamity, where Grade 1 sorcerers were even saying, I don't even want to fight him. If it had to came to it, I would either run for my life or take my life. That's how terrifying this guy is. He's got so much cursed energy that when there was a mass group of Grade 1s, the strongest of the modern day, they literally froze and couldn't move as Dabura was walking. The only person that could walk or even move was Usami, and even when he used cursed speech on Dabura, it didn't have an effect. It literally didn't affect him. He just walked it off. Simply him walking off the technique, not even touching Usami, put him in a life-threatening coma. That is how strong this guy is. Usami is one of the strongest Grade 1s around. It is baffling how strong Dabura is, and then we get to see his destruction during his fight with Maharaga, with Dabura easily being an Honored One character level, and everything that was said before comparing him to Sukuna making sense when we saw him fight Maharaga. It just puts it all into perspective when you realize that all of these characters knew Dabura was this strong because they could sense it, and they kept saying, yeah, Yuji can take this guy. Yuji is an equal deterrent. We need Yuji to show them we have someone like Dabura. They already know this whole time that Yuka had the 10 shadows and she had Maharaga, and that same Grade 1 girl who said, if I saw Dabura, I would kill myself or run away, and she was the one who called him a calamity, the same way Uro called Sukuna, who saw Sukuna, and she has seen him. She was there and sensed Dabura's cursed energy. She herself said, Maharaga is only hope against Dabura. Only hope. But Yuji is actually a very good chance to win. The comparison of Maharaga just being a slim chance and their best bet and the strongest bet is Yuji. It is incredible when you actually just take a step back and think about what she's saying. They see Yuji as that power. The reason I say this is because some people think there's no way Yuji reached that level, but remember, it was said by Gojo that 80% of a sorcerer's talent comes from their technique alone. Yuji already with that 20% when he didn't have a technique was already stronger than characters who had gifted techniques. Yuji was already one of the strongest Grade 1s before he got a technique. With that 20%, Yuji outshined sorcerers who had the full 100%. That is how strong Yuji was without a technique, that massive 80% chance. Now, it depends what technique you get because that determines how far your potential can go, and the greater the technique you have, the higher your potential is. That doesn't mean you're automatically going to be strong. Like we saw Megumi had the 10 shadows and he was only Grade 2 after years and years of training, over a decade of training. Even though that technique has the potential to make you the strongest in history, I mean, look at when Sukuna used it and how he utilized the 10 shadows against Satoru Gojo. You could see how strong the full potential is. The point I'm trying to say is Yuji's potential with blood manipulation alone is top 5 in all of Jujutsu history. That's how strong the blood manipulation is. Whether you believe it or not, whether you think it makes sense or not, that is simply a fact. As was said multiple times, that is a cherished technique that rivals, yes, this was said directly on Sori, it rivals the 10 shadows and 6 eyes limitless. I myself don't know how it could ever reach that level, but I just like to imagine if Sukuna had the blood manipulation technique and what he would do with that technique, like the insane things Sukuna could probably do, then it probably makes more sense to me why it is a top 5 technique in history, and why 1,000 years ago during the Heian era, the 3 vengeful cursed spirits, one of blood manipulation, one of the 10 shadows technique, and one of 6 eyes limitless, Michizain Sugawara, who, mind you, in a canon light novel, Michizain Sugawara, the 6 eyes limitless user, was confirmed to be at least around Gojo's level, if not stronger, if not a bit weaker, but around that level where Gojo himself says that would actually be a very tough fight, he says seriously. And a blood manipulation user 1,000 years ago was on par with. It makes more sense when you realize that the blood manipulation user from the Heian era was a vengeful cursed spirit, meaning they didn't have the drawbacks of blood, because as a cursed spirit they could just convert their own cursed energy into blood. So a lot of people and myself theorize that the only way to reach the full potential of blood manipulation is to actually not be human, because you're just so limited as a human being where you can only use the blood in your own body or blood bags. It's such a massive limit to a godlike technique. It greatly nerfs the technique's utility because you're just limited in blood supply. But the moment you become someone like a death painting or a vengeful cursed spirit, that is when the potential truly awakens and you could just do wondrous things with it. And that's why Yuji has the true full potential of the blood manipulation that even Noritoshi Kamo wouldn't have, because he has the body of a death painting after eating his brothers, and he can convert his own cursed energy into blood. He's just like Choso or even a cursed spirit. He's not limited by blood bags or the blood in his own body. He can just create blood cheaply with cursed energy. I mean, look at what Choso was doing, only a Grade 1 level sorcerer. He made a tsunami of blood when he was fighting Naoya. Can you imagine what Yuji, with Sukuna's cursed energy, and God knows how strong he is right now, how much he could do with his blood after 68 years of training? If Choso was able to fill an entire underground room, a massive room with blood, it's just insane when you think about it. And one other thing is Yuji's blood is poisonous. A lot of people sleep on that fact, but the death paintings have poisonous blood. Yuji was originally human, but he's not human anymore. He's not a cursed spirit and he's not a human, he's a death painting, which it's like a mix in between of human and cursed spirit, but so much so that it's like a hybrid where it becomes a brand new thing entirely. But the point is, Yuji's blood is actually toxic to humans, so if Yuji fights, let's say, Nobara, he could actually poison Nobara with his blood without Nobara even realizing it. Of course, if Nobara has reverse curse technique and specifically is able to heal poisons, he would be able to counter it, but just one of the incredible things where, yes, Yuji even has poison that a lot of people don't realize, and I've never seen anyone mention that fact, that yes, Yuji's blood is poisonous to humans now. And even because it is a death painting, it's also poisonous to cursed spirits because it's humans' blood. The death paintings are pretty OP in this way because their blood is poisonous to both cursed spirits and to humans because they're a mix of both. It's a very incredible buff. Now, I'm going to list some of the techniques that the blood manipulation users can do. They can do flowing red scale, which increases the user's body temperature, pulse rate, and the number of red blood cells to give themselves really increased cursed energy and physical capabilities. And also, real quick, I will shout out the wiki for this because they made a perfect list just so I can check all of the techniques they have, because I can give all of these to Yuji. He has flowing red scale stack, which intensifies flowing red scale in order to increase the user's physical capabilities to a higher degree than normal, which if there is a higher level of flowing red scale, and Choso has the stacked version, what about a special grade level of flowing red scale? I can't even imagine, with his special grade level reinforcement output and 68 years of training with the technique, how strong Yuji's flowing red scale is going to be on top of his special grade level reinforcement output and already physically gifted and strong body. He has Crimson Binding, which can just bind things. We saw Kamo use this against the Nue. Slicing Exorcism, which is a long range attack to slice their opponents. This is what Choso used against Gojo. Convergence, one of the most famous techniques when you basically compress and condense all of the blood in your body. Not all of it, but it's just compressed to such a tiny extent that a little orb is made, and you can use many techniques from this. For example, the very famous piercing blood, incredibly fast, incredibly strong. Even Urume said a grade 1 level piercing blood was fast, and it injured Urume as well. And you can also make the supernova from it, which is a very unique technique and is actually a creation of Choso, an original technique, which Yuji should be able to do after seeing it from Choso, and Choso at least probably demonstrating it to him once during the 2 months. Yuji didn't learn supernova over the 2 months as they wanted him to focus on the fundamental techniques, but I imagine at the very least Choso probably did show it to him, and I was like, you know, this supernova, this is how you use it, you can probably learn how to do this later. There's the blood edge, which creates a dagger, probably not useful for Yuji who's got Cleaviness Mantle, but hey, something he could have. And the blood meteorite, which is a hardened part of the blood, which is slower and weaker than piercing blood, but it has its uses because it's very small and it can be hidden. These are the only blood manipulation techniques that we are aware of. The thing is, there's going to be far more that Yuji has, and Yuji definitely created a lot over the 68 years as well. As I said before, and I never really finished the sentence, but Yuji has the blood manipulation, which gives him top 5 potential in the technique, but he also has another technique, which is also top 5 in the verse, which gives him double the potential he already had. And before I say this technique, you already know it's Shrine, it was even said directly by Urume that Yuji has the same potential as Sukuna, specifically because he's got a portion of his soul as well, and he was Sukuna's vessel. But of course, the next technique is Shrine, which comes with the famous Cleave and Dismantle, very strong cutting attacks with different purposes as well. Dismantle is the most common one that you see that goes flying around. It's the one that he uses the most, whereas Cleave is something that you need to use when you're close to someone, but Cleave is far more lethal, like definitely more lethal, and it's what he used to kill the Finger Bearer, it's what he used to kill Ryushigori, and it's what he always used to cut people when he's close. For example, when he fought Yuji, he used Cleave multiple times to cut his body apart. It's interesting, but when he uses the World Cutting Slash, he actually uses the Dismantle specifically for the World Cutting Slash. Now, a lot of people think, could Yuji actually do the World Cutting Slash? The World Cutting Slash isn't unique to Sukuna, as we saw Mahoraga did it first. It's not a curse technique, it's a technique that anybody could do, but it just takes such a high level to do it. I don't think anyone, even Yuji, would ever be able to do the World Cutting Slash. Basically, what you're doing is you're changing the target of your technique to not cut or attack a specific object, but to attack the world itself. For example, if Gojo were to learn this, Gojo would be able to apply the World Cutting Slash onto his Hollow Purple. It would be a world-destroying Hollow Purple where the target wouldn't be, let's say, the objects or a certain person, it would be the world itself, which there would be no defending against it. You can apply this to any technique. I mean, even blood manipulation, you can make world-piercing blood manipulation, piercing blood, if you just simply knew how to define your target as the very world itself. I don't think it's something Yuji could do, but even if you want to make the argument that because he was in Sukuna's body body, maybe he could. The thing is, Sukuna learned this technique when he was in Megumi's body. He never performed it in Yuji's body, so in that way, Yuji wouldn't have any muscle memory to do it. But yes, Yuji does have Cleaveness Mantle, and it is altered as we saw because the generation is different and the sorcerer is different. And Sukuna did say the output is weak, but he clarifies it is only weak because he literally just unlocked it. Like, the first time he ever used it was against Sukuna, and that's why its output was weak. But it was still so powerful that it was able to greatly damage Sukuna, as we'll talk about later. And of course, the final thing that Yuji does have is the Divine Flame or Furnace. Now, a lot of people confuse it that this is only a technique that you can use after a domain expansion, but that's not actually how it can work. You can use the Divine Flame, the Furnace, at any time you want. The reason Sukuna can only use it after a domain expansion is because of a binding vow he made during the Heian era. He actually has two separate binding vows on his Divine Flame that A, he cannot use it on multiple targets unless it's within a domain expansion, and B, he actually boosts the strength of the Divine Flame by making a binding vow with his own domain to use the ashes and pieces cut with it to create a combustion. It's a bit complicated to explain, but there's multiple binding vows on it, which is the reason that Sukuna uses it the way he does, and he didn't just open and fire it constantly at random different points. The thing is, Yuji doesn't have these binding vows on his flames. If he wanted to, he could at any point make these divine flames. Now, of course, because it doesn't have the same binding vows as Sukuna, it wouldn't nearly be as strong as Sukuna, even if he reached Sukuna's level. Sukuna made those binding vows to make the flames stronger, but in exchange, of course, it was limited in its use and could only be used in specific times with specific amount of opponents. However, if Yuji doesn't make that, he could just generally use flames. Not as fast or as strong, but it would still be very strong. Imagine he could coat his body in flames. We saw Sukuna when he lit his fingers and used it generally, it doesn't seem to affect him, maybe because it's his own cursed energy, but yeah, the fire doesn't affect the technique user itself, so Yuji could coat his fist in flames, his body in flames, or do anything with that, and it actually wouldn't hurt him because that's his own fire. The point being, Yuji does have divine flames. It may even turn out differently because he is a different sorcerer from a different era, the color may be different, the application of it may be different, who knows how it may turn out. Even because Sukuna has the divine furnace, which in the Japanese specifically refers to a hearth or stove that was used during the Heian period, it could be possible that because Yuji's from the modern era, his divine flames could be different. Instead of it being a hearth, the old-time stoves that they used back in the Heian era, he could have the air fryer divine flames or the microwave divine flames. Now, I'm joking with that, but unironically, because he's from the modern age, that should actually change his technique. It wouldn't be something like that, I'm joking of course, but something like that. And of course, Yuji did make a binding vow to make it so his technique only hits the soul, but because of that, that greatly increased the output of it, and because he limited what it could affect, and even though it didn't cut Sukuna physically, it cut the soul of Sukuna and the border between Sukuna and Megumi's soul, so much so that Sukuna was terrified after getting hit by it, and he even vomits out the Sukuna fingers and swallows it back up. Even more so, he was terrified to ever get hit by that again, as once Yuji pops the domain and actually hits him, it was checkmate at that point. Now, it is debated about in the fanbase whether Yuji made a permanent binding vow or a temporary binding vow. There are two types of binding vows in JJK. There's the type where you specifically apply it to a one-time technique and you're saying, I'll make this technique for the specific time, only target this specific person or do the specific thing, but after that, the binding vow will be broken, but I'll still get the boost from it. However, there's a second type of binding vow, which is a permanent binding vow. Now, we have two examples of both. The permanent binding vow, the best case is seen with Miwa, where she said, I'll never swing a katana again. Thus, she was just never able to swing the katana again. And the most famous and commonly used by dozens of characters binding vow is the revealing of one hand's binding vow, which is a temporary one, where you reveal your technique's information and name, and that actually will boost your next attack to be stronger, quite a lot stronger actually. I think it's a 20% buff, and in exchange for that, you get that buff, but it's not permanent, you know, it's temporary. You're not losing anything forever, it's only for a specific time, you give them an advantage, but you also get an advantage. The question is, did Yuji hasten and just quickly make a binding vow in the heat of the moment that's permanent, so his Cleaveness Mantle can only attack people's souls, or was that just a temporary binding vow where he said, for this specific attack, I make a binding vow that it only targets the soul, but because of this temporary binding vow, this one-time attack with that binding vow is going to be far stronger against the soul. I do hope that Yuji made a temporary binding vow, but it always could be possible that he made a permanent one because he may have just rushed it in the heat of the moment to defeat Sukuna, as Miwa did when she was fighting Kenjaku, because as you're in battle, you could rush it in that way, but I hope, again, he just made a temporary one and he can still use Cleaviness Mantle physically on the physical world. He would still have Cleaviness Mantle and it would still be strong because it would cut people's soul up. So imagine Yuji one-shots you with Cleaviness Mantle, you don't have a physical cut on you, but you just die because he cuts your soul in half. It doesn't make him weaker, but it would just be cooler if he could use the physical aspect of it. And of course, Yuji has his domain expansion that we still don't know the name of, and I hope we find out in JJK Modulo. This domain expansion is beautiful, of course. We see it's got a lot of symbolism due to Buddhism and all of these things that tie to Yuji. Now, I am not smart enough to know about Buddhism and all of these symbolic things in regards to Japanese and Buddhism and all these things, so I'll read this directly from a post I found online, but people theorize that one of the symbolisms is with the statue that's hiding behind Yuji, it's a benevolent smile, and it could be in reference to Jesus. Others think that he is using the hand sign of Kitsigapara. I'm really sorry if I'm saying that wrong, but it's a bodhisattva, I probably butchered that as well, that guides others to enlightenment before he does, which does align with what Yuji actually says. But the main point is that it symbolizes guidance, protection, and all of this represents a journey of purification, actually aiming to guide Sukuna's soul towards redemption. The symbol, as said by many people, is Shiti Garba Mudra. It's got a lot of symbolism. If you do want to know more about it, I would recommend looking it up, but I hope at least that could explain the surface level things, because I myself, I'm not too knowledgeable on Buddhism. As I say, I will admit, I don't want to act like I know it all and pretend I came up with this myself. I absolutely did not. It's even hard for me to say these names, but I do find that very cool and interesting, and if any of you are actually interested any further, I hope this could have been some cool facts for you about his domain expansion. But yes, it does tie back into his own hometown, his own history, as we can see even the ducks, the geese and ducks flying in the background and all these things, and of course his sure hit is similar to Sukuna's, where it is just Cleaviness Mantle, and rather than Sukuna's just cutting up everything and destroying everything, it's interesting, but Yuji chooses to just have one massive attack rather than having a lot of small attacks, which actually goes in line with his goal, because we know you can actually choose how your domain expansion is going to be. I mean, even there's such unique cases like Yuta where he literally chooses his sure hit based off of his copy techniques. Like, you could do whatever the hell you want with this. And even Yorozu being an even more unique example where she creates a technique before her domain expansion and uses that technique that she made as a sure hit that she can copy and paste. Domains are very unique, even more so in regards to sure hits. If Sukuna wanted to, he could do the same thing as Yuji, where instead of having a trillion small cuts, he could just have a massive big cut. But Sukuna just chooses to have the smaller cuts because it goes very well with A, his character destroying everything, and specifically B, all of the dust and ash that's made after destroying everything actually allows him to use his divine firmness on a nuclear level. The whole reason it's that strong is because of all the debris and dust and these type of things that are made from him destroying everything around. Sukuna's is a lot more tactical than we know. The point is, Yuji's domain expansion does do a massive cut. Of course, once Yuji has mastered his technique and is able to be on Sukuna's level, I imagine this cut is just gonna cut people in half, no matter who you are. But it's interesting because Yuji could even infuse his technique with blood manipulation, have a blood manipulation style domain sure hit, or even, as we saw with Sukuna, he actually infused a soul-cutting attack as the sure hit. A lot of people forget this, but his sure hit was infused with soul attacks, and that's why it actually defeated Sukuna in the end. So Yuji could apply that to his own blood manipulation techniques just generally to attack the soul of people if he uses a temporary binding vow, and Yuji could be someone who could master an open domain. This is because, as was explained by Kusakabe, Yuji's body has muscle memory and remembers the special jujutsu of Sukuna. So Yuji would actually have that muscle memory of opening an open domain expansion, and especially because it all happened within his body and mind. So if he did train more, he could awaken an open domain expansion, which is an incredible feat. It probably would take a couple decades for him to reach that point. It's very, very hard, but he could do it if he wanted to. And of course, Yuji is a Black Flash prodigy, so much so that it was said by multiple characters, once by Sukuna during Shinjuku Showdown, once again by Mahito, that Yuji is so good with Black Flashes that it actually feels like he can just hit it on command, especially when he's in the heat of battle and in the moment. He can actually just hit it on command. I mean, we saw him chain and break the record against Sukuna when he hit 7-8 Black Flashes. I mean, he already tied it when he was fighting Naname during the Tokyo event. And the incredible thing about the Naname point, I'm sorry, Haname point, I think I was saying Naname this whole time. Haname point because the name's a cinema. He just learned Cursed Energy and all these things very recently, and he didn't even know what a Black Flash was. Todo literally explained, this is a Black Flash, and Yuji proceeded to break the record in all of Jujutsu history. A lot of people say he's not a prodigy, but things like that showcase he is a prodigy. I mean, his instincts for fighting and his natural talent for fighting and martial arts is off the charts. I mean, it's genuinely incredible. He does things even Sukuna and Gojo can't, with the way he hits Black Flashes all the time. And of course, as you keep hitting Black Flashes, it actually makes you stronger. It gives you a permanent boost, but also a temporary one at the same time that makes you far more in the zone, as we saw used by Gojo, and even Yuji himself, and even Sukuna. It can even restore your output and such things. A Black Flash is a great thing to hit. And Yuji being a master of Black Flashes, I mean, hey, that goes to show how strong he is. All that being said, when you stack onto the fact that he's had 68 years in his prime, in his absolute prime, he is just going to be an absolute beast. And that is an understatement. We already know he's far stronger than Mahoraga. We've already seen him be compared to Dabura, who's on Sukuna and Gojo's level. We already saw as a 15-year-old teenager who'd not even been a sorcerer for 8 months. He had domain expansion, reverse curse technique, special grade level reinforcement output, broke the record for Black Flashes in all of history, better than Sukuna and Gojo in that aspect. Body of a death painting, 2 top 5 techniques in the verse, and all of this at the age of 15, barely just learning about Jujutsu sorcery. Give him 68 years, and not just the 68 years where he becomes an old man, retaining his prime in youth. I don't even want to imagine how strong he is, and it makes sense why characters are saying Yuji is on Sukuna's and Gojo's level, where characters are saying he's way stronger than Mahoraga and a better option than Mahoraga against Dabura. And I just cannot wait to see Prime Yuji, Immortal Yuji in JJK Modulo. But hey, let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you did enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like, it helps out so much. Thank you very much, and of course, be sure to subscribe for a ton of consistent and quality JJK content just like this. If you love JJK Modulo, you love Jujutsu Kaisen generally, and hey, if you've watched this far, you're not gonna regret subscribing to this channel. Trust me, you're gonna love it. But hey, that's all from me. Have a great day, guys, and take care.